Are you struggling to come up with a literature review? This video is for you. In this video, we will conduct a literature review using NVivo 14. We will use NVivo to develop a literature evaluation table like this. The literature evaluation table will help us to identify important sections of our retrieved literature, including the author's article title, article's purpose, definitions, quotable explanations, theories or models used, sample size, methods, findings, conclusions, and directions for future research. This will give us an idea of research gaps. Now, after you have all this figured out, it's easy to compare and write an accurate literature review that sets the foundation for your thesis or research paper. Before I forget, my name is Bernard Mugo, a qualitative research specialist from Surviving Research. The first step when conducting a literature review using NVivo will be to collect different scholarly articles that we will review to find theoretical frameworks and research gaps that will support our study. If you don't know how to retrieve scholarly sources, check out this video, link in the description. The first step in conducting a literature review with NVivo is to import the files, most likely the journal articles that you collected, using a reference management tool. In this case, I'm using Zotero as my reference management tool. Zotero is a free reference manager that you can use to retrieve your scholarly sources. So check out my previous videos on how to use Zotero to retrieve scholarly sources, and you'll get an idea how I imported all these sources. Now, I want to save these sources in a file format that NVivo can be able to open. So I click Ctrl All on my computer, then I go to File, I go to Export Library. I want to export the whole library. I don't want to export the notes I had made there and the annotations, only the files. So I click OK, and then this is my previous folder. I can name this Attention based on my topic of focus, Attention, and I can save that folder. Now, after saving that folder, I can go ahead and open NVivo and begin conducting the literature review process using this powerful software. The first thing I'll do is to create a new project. Let's call this project Attention Literature Review and click Next. NVivo will open a new project. Remember, on your left in NVivo, we have the data area. This is where we store our files and we can also classify the files. We have the coding area where we fix our codes. In a literature review, we won't use sentiment, but we might try to explore relationships between different concepts. Then we have cases. We have a place for notes where we store memos. We can create a framework matrix, and we also store annotations. We also have queries, which are the different types of queries we'll be conducting on the scholarly articles that we import. We have the visualization, which are the different ways to visualize the information that we retrieve. And we have reports, which is the area where NVivo stores every report related. Like if we do some coding, NVivo is going to store a report there, a coding report. So those are the basic tools that NVivo has. Now, the first step to take when conducting a literature review in NVivo is to import our scholarly articles. So we move to the import section in NVivo at the top, and then we go to bibliography, and then we go to Zotero, which is the one I used. If you used Menly, click on Menly. If you used Citavi, click on Citavi. If you used EndNote, click on EndNote. And if you used RefWorks, click on RefWorks. Now, I used Zotero, so I click on Zotero. And then I want to go back and import this Attention 2 folder, which is the folder we just exported from Zotero. So we click, then we click on this file, this Attention 2 file, which is a .ris file, and we click Open. NVivo is going to give us a dialog box here that we are going to say import. I'm not going to change anything at this time, so I click import, and NVivo is importing the different articles that we are going to use for our literature review. These are the different files. They are in the file section. As you can see, we have 20 items that were imported by NVivo. These items are in PDF format, as we can see. If you want to open the items, just double click and then you can open the PDFs, and these are the PDFs we are going to use to conduct our literature review for our topic of a phenomenological study related to the struggle for attention of students. Now, that is how you import scholarly articles into NVivo. Let's look at the next step, which is to classify or classification of files into NVivo. I want to click on this area called file classifications. Once NVivo imports your document, it imports all the document details. What do we mean? If you click on the file classification area and go to the reference and click on this plus button, you will see the different attributes for every scholarly article that NVivo imports. If you were to double click on this reference area, you'll see a table that contains the titles of the articles imported, right? The reference type, whether they are web pages, journal articles, conference papers, the authors for the different imported articles, the year of publication, the secondary title, and all the other details. Now, let's say we wanted to delete all the details that we do not want on this table because we're going to go ahead and export this table. Now, I want to delete last updated, added to library, language, database, all this, name, custom, access date. I want to delete all these areas because they are not relevant. All the address, file attachments, URL. I can leave the keywords. So I highlight all those sections I don't want to appear in my attributes area and delete all of them. So I click yes. Then I want to delete label, call number, accession number, custom 7, custom 6, custom 5, custom 4, custom 3, custom, all these customs, all this. I leave the DOI. Let me delete all those first. Simply what we are doing here is cleaning up the data in our scholarly articles, especially the data related to attributes. These are what are called attributes in NVivo. These are the characteristics of the scholarly articles that we just imported. Again, I click shift, then I delete all this. I delete all these details. I don't need them. Then I also want to delete publisher, all this, number of volumes, number, all these details. I want to delete them. I want to leave the digital object identifier, the author, the reference type. These are the only details I want to leave. And I also want to add one detail here, all attribute. So I right click on the reference section. I add new attribute, and we want to call this research design. And I want to import values, so we come here and click on the values section and then click add. I want to call this qualitative. I add another box, quantitative. I add mixed, and I click OK. You can see another attribute has been added on the reference, which is the research design. Now, let's go back to the reference and double click it and see the kind of table NVivo will generate this time round. Let's double click and see. You can see now the table doesn't have too many details. It has the title of each article, the reference type, the author, the year that the article was published, the title again, the digital object identifier, the DOI, the keywords for each article, like we can go and highlight the keywords, and then the research design, which is the attribute that I just added. For example, if this article was qualitative, I can assign qualitative. If the next article was quantitative, I can assign quantitative. If the other one was qualitative, I can assign qualitative. I can go checking all my articles and classifying them into the research design that they were done in. Now, if I wanted to only access the articles or quantitative articles, I can click OK, and my table will only show me the quantitative articles according to the assigned values. If I only wanted mixed, I can click OK, and I will only see mixed articles. I can also clear the filter to access all the articles that contains all the information related to the scholarly articles I will use for my literature review. I can press Ctrl-Shift-E, which is the shortcut for exporting any information in NVivo. So I can then browse and save this in one of my folders. let's save that here and we can click OK. We can view the file we just saved. NVivo exports the file into spreadsheet format in Excel format, and you can see these are the details of the different articles that we imported and which we are going to use to conduct our literature review. You can see we have every detail, and you can make sure that you assign all the areas. If you don't need like keywords, you can delete such attributes. If you do not need the article title because the titles are already here, you can exclude the article title. So that's how you export the attributes of different articles in NVivo. Allow me to interrupt this tutorial to inform you of my services. If you are stuck because of any issue related to NVivo, or you need one-on-one guidance on how to use NVivo in your project, I'm available for one-on-one coaching sessions and done for you services. Write me a message right now, link and email address in the description. Thank you, and let's get back to the video. The first thing we can do is to conduct something we call queries in our data. Now, the first thing I do when conducting a literature review to understand what all the articles talk about is to run something we call a word frequency query. So on the home button in NVivo, go to query and go to word frequency query. We click on the word frequency query, and here we want to see the most frequent used words. I want 100, not 1,000, and I want a minimum length of 3, that's okay. And I want to conduct this on files and externals, which are the files I just imported, which are the scholarly articles, and I want to run my query. Let's see what we get. We have run our query, and we can see attention is one of the most mentioned words. It's mentioned 1,062 times in our scholarly articles. Then we have students 749, learning, and all that. If you look at the right, you'll see summary, word cloud. I can click to generate a word cloud, and NVivo is generating a word cloud for us to visualize or to show us the most prevalent words in the scholarly articles that we want to use for our literature review. So let's see how the word cloud looks. And this is the word cloud that we have. The bigger the words in the word cloud, the more frequently they have been used in our assessed articles. So we can see attention, social use, learning, students, college, online. We can see that these articles relate to our topic of the struggle for attention among college students. NVivo will also give us a tree map of the most used words. You can see here, attention, students, and news are the most used words. If you want to export either the word cloud or the tree map, it's easy. Press Ctrl Shift and E as the shortcut. We can call this most used words. So these are the most used words. Now you can right click on the word cloud and run a text search query depending on the different words that you get by running a word frequency query on your scholarly articles. For example, I want to run a text search query on learning, and I want to see the context in which the word learning is used. I'll drag this to stemmed words to give NVivo more allowance, and I will also include the broad content here, and then I run the query. You can see the summary. These are the different articles that contain the term learning, and I want to check them as references to see where the word learning is mentioned in the different articles, and you can see where the word learning is mentioned in the different articles. I can save these queries as a theme and use them in the literature review table. So what I'll do is I'll go to save results, and I can save these as codes and then call this learning and click OK. All that information will be exported to the codes section. As you can see, if we go to the code section now, we have learning as a main theme, and we have the different areas in our scholarly articles that talk about learning. You can go through them and make notes, annotations, or delete the paragraphs that you don't find relevant. For example, if I read this paragraph, I don't see any area that this paragraph mentions learning. So I can highlight it and either click on uncode and click on where that code is found and click okay? And that's how you uncode or delete themes and codes in NVivo. So I can quickly go through all the articles, all this information, and delete anything that doesn't have to do with learning. You can also check the PDFs. If you go to the right, you can see the sections that NVivo has highlighted as containing the learning theme in my different studies. Again, we can also go back to the word frequency query results and highlight another word like students and run a text search query for students. You can see students. So we can use exact matches for this one, exact matches, but here I like using the broad context so that NVivo can give me full paragraphs. Again, we can run this query and see what will happen. We can see these are the different files that mention students and the percentage coverage of the word students in these different files. Again, what I can do is I can see the references. I can save the results in the codes section and I can call these students, which is everywhere students are mentioned in my scholarly articles. And you see NVivo imports the theme students. Again, you can go through all the paragraphs that have been highlighted and see the ones that are not relevant to the theme of students, and you can delete them through the encoding step I showed you. For example, if this paragraph did not have any area where it talks about students, or this paragraph here, we can right click and the general theme is called students and encode. So that's how you establish the main information that is contained in your scholarly articles when conducting a literature review using NVivo. There is no need to go reading all the articles to know what they talk about. You just run a word frequency query, as I showed you, and then you check out the main themes and you perform what we call a text search query on each of the words. I can also run a text search query on attention, and I want to use the broad context and I want to run the query. Again, because we've done this before, I want to check the references. We have the different areas where attention is mentioned, and I want to save the results. I want to save the results in the codes, and I call this attention, and those are my codes. And now you have attention here. I can take time to go and skim through all the areas that attention is mentioned in my scholarly articles and encode and only leave the specific areas where attention is mentioned. This function of using the word frequency query and the text search query after we get the results from the word cloud is important in identifying the main themes or the main information that is contained in your articles. And these are the themes that you are going to export. We are going to export these themes in something we call the framework matrix table, and these are the themes you are going to include in your literature review. Now, we can conduct something we call a text search query to highlight specific sections in the scholarly articles. So let's say we want to highlight the purpose of every article that we imported, because we will use the purpose in our literature review. So we press Ctrl A and then we go to query, text search query, and I want to highlight purpose of study, and I want the broad context, and I want to run this query. This is a text search query, and let's see the different references. We click on our right. On this area you see the references, and if we go through, this study investigated problematic social media use. Of course, that is the purpose of the study. You see, we have another one. In this study we examine the relationships between PSMU, FOMO, mindful attention, self-esteem, and life satisfaction among college students. So we can save this, and again we save it under codes, and let's call this purpose of studies. That is another section in our literature review, because we can evaluate the purpose of each study and include that in our literature review. And we go to codes. It has already opened here, purpose of studies, and if you double click on our new theme, purpose of studies, you can see these are the different purposes identified in all our scholarly articles. You can go through them and delete the areas that do not represent the purpose. We delete by encoding, because the purpose in this case is our theme. For example, this one does not appear to be the purpose, so we can highlight all of it and we go to encode. From this code code and we click OK. And that's how you remove sections that you do not like from specific themes. Already we have attention, students, purpose of studies, social, learning. You can do a text search query and create any theme that you're going to include in your literature review. For example, I can go ahead and try to look for something we call sample. I go to files, control all to highlight all my sources. Then I go to query. I do something we call the text search query. And the text search query I want to do relates to sample population or sample size. And I want to run an exact match, and I want to do a broad context, and I run the query. Let's see what we get. If we look at the references here, you can see that the different areas where the word sample size is mentioned will be highlighted. So I can save these results. Again, I save this in codes and I call this sample sizes. This will represent the different sample sizes in the scholarly articles that I will use for my literature review. And again, we can always go back to codes and delete any section that does not represent a sample size. But if you look closely here, you can see that any place that mentions the sample size will be highlighted. Again, we can try to evaluate the methods used in each of the articles. I can highlight and again go to text search query and search methodology. Let me highlight the broad context and run the query again. Only 2 articles highlight their methodology, and we can save these results in the codes section, and we call this methodology and click OK. So we have identified so many or a lot of information that we can include in our literature review. And NVivo makes it easy to review different articles at the same time without going through them one by one. You can just use the text search query and the word frequency query to identify what the articles talk about and to go through each theme that you create and refine the information. For example, this is not a methodology. I can uncode this code, and that's another theme. I can also include theories in my articles. So I control all, I go to query, text search query. I want to identify the different theories that are used in the different scholarly articles that I want to utilize for my literature review. Again, I run this query, check the references, and we can see the different theoretical approaches that the scholarly articles have highlighted. I can save these results. I select codes, I click OK, and I call these theories, and I click OK. Finally, I want to include something we call research gaps. Text search query, I will type this sentence, directions for future research, and I can run this query, and we can see the different directions for future research in the different articles, which will highlight the research gap in this area. Remember, when you're doing a thesis, dissertation, or a research paper, you will focus more on the suggested research gaps from the previous researchers. So I can save these results. Again, I select the codes area, I click OK, and let's call this directions for future research, and I click OK. Again, you can go to our codes and try to check out this one, and we can try to check the PDFs where directions for future research has been mentioned. We can see this area, limitations and directions for future research. So after you identify an area, you can do what we call annotation, which is highlight the area and right click and create a new annotation, Ctrl+Shift+A, and you can call this directions for future research. And NVivo is going to save that annotation. So that's how you create annotations in NVivo. You can also create a memo, like what we call a linked memo. To create a memo, you highlight, right click on a given area, then go down there, you'll see an area called links, then memo link, and you create a memo link. So that's how you annotate and create memos in NVivo. Now we have all our themes, or it's like we have read all our articles and come up with different areas of concern that we would like to focus on in our literature review. We have attention, we have students, we have the purpose of previous studies, directions for future research, which is going to give us a research gap, social, learning, sample sizes, we have the theories, and you have the methodology. And I also wanted to show you that if you double click on every article and you want to see the areas that NVivo has already highlighted, you can can click on the coding stripe and click all. You will see the different sections that talk about or the different themes that are highlighted. For example, here you can see the area in pink represents the social theme. The social theme is in this section, so you can read that section. If we click on the green area, we can see that represents the purpose of the study. So it's very easy to identify specific areas in the scholarly articles after doing the coding or identifying the themes using the word frequency query and the text search query in NVivo. We can also click on this highlight, which shows all the highlighted areas in a given scholarly article, all the highlighted areas. But normally you will use the coding stripes to identify specific codes in your scholarly articles when conducting a literature review. Now, another tool that we can use when conducting literature review in NVivo is something we call the matrix coding query. The matrix coding query can help us to identify research gaps by representing the themes that are prevalent and the themes that are not prevalent. I go to the explore button, click on the matrix coding query. Then on the rows, I want to have all the articles. Let me just select them one by one. I want to have all my articles and I click OK. We have a repeated article there. Then on the items, I want to have the different codes that we identified and I click OK. Then I want to run this query to develop a matrix table and I want you to see what NVivo does. So this one was included. I didn't want that. One file was included. I want to delete that and I want to run the query again. You can see the prevalent themes that are found in our scholarly articles and you can see the themes that do not have a lot of information. For example, theories, not much information on social, not much information on sample sizes, not much information on methodology. So you can use such a matrix table to determine which themes are prevalent in the scholarly articles that you have and which theme do not have a lot of information, which can also be helpful for you in identifying research gaps. So for the matrix table, you can shade it like a heat map to show the most prevalent or the articles with the most prevalent themes. For example, university students motivated attention use of regulation. That article has a lot to do with attention. Also, this article has a lot to do with attention. This article does not mention anything to do with learning. The internet addiction article does not mention anything also to do with learning, and so on. So that's how you can evaluate the number of times given themes are recorded or the number of times given themes are highlighted in your scholarly articles. And from there, you can make a decision of the focus of your study. And you can also find research gaps in your study. Again, we can also shade this with green and yellow like a heat map also to show the areas that have much information and the areas that have less information. You can export this by Ctrl+Shift+E and you can export that and you can give it a name like matrix coding query research gaps. Let's save it. And if we go to our folder and open it, you can see we come up with a very clear table that is showing us the areas that do not, or the themes that are not explored significantly. Remember, my themes are just examples. If I was doing the real literature review, I could have gotten more themes or specific themes based on what I want to study. So that's how you use the matrix coding query to identify research themes using NVivo 14. You can also switch the columns to percentages also. You can also switch according to the words coded, which is the default. So you can export your table in any format, either the words coded or the column percentages or the row percentages. Depends on how you want it. Now, the next tool that we can use is something we call diagrams, and we can use cluster analysis, and we want to do a cluster analysis on files and externals, and we click OK, and I want to select all the files here. This one will show the files that are more related to each other, which is important when you are conducting a literature review. I click OK. This is the cluster analysis, and I want to use this circle here. Let me zoom in. You can see these articles are more related to one another. These are more related to one another. These are more related to one another. These are more related to one another. This is very important in writing your literature review because you can really understand the relationship between different articles that you want to use in your literature review. Another thing we can use in NVivo is a mind map. For example, variables. I create the mind map in maps. I can draw this concept map or this mind map to represent independent variable. Then click on the child idea. This one will be dependent. Then on the other side, we can click on another child idea. Also, this one is a dependent variable. You can also insert a floating idea, an idea that does not relate to your original ideas. So that's how you draw a mind map in NVivo. When writing your literature review, you can draw a mind map to show the interconnectedness of the different concepts that you're going to find in your literature review process. So that's how you use the mind map function in NVivo. The other thing that NVivo can help you to do is to visualize the different attributes that you have, or to classify files that you have according to the different attributes. For example, you can see the scholarly articles I have, most of them are journal articles, and I think I have 2 conference papers and 1 web page. And the years of publication, if I right click here and visualize chart file attribute, you can see the years of publication that I have. I have an unassigned one, but I have majority of my articles were published in 2021. So you can see majority of articles here were published in 2016. So that's how NVivo treats this. We can also see the research design. If we had classified all our articles, we could see the research designs. We can see the majority are not assigned. If we assigned all of them, we could be able to visualize the different research designs that are present in our articles. I want to go to the files, highlight all of them, and before we create a framework matrix, we need to have something we call cases. Cases generally will be our scholarly articles that we imported. So I go to files, control all, then create as cases. I ensure that all my articles are represented as cases. NVivo is going to create cases from all my articles. And then when NVivo creates cases, I can go to the framework matrix. I want to call this the literature evaluation table, and I want to select all the articles as cases. So I select them. I click OK, confirm these are all my articles. Then I want to go to the columns and select the different codes, and I click OK. Then I click OK, and let's generate our framework matrix, which in this case will be a literature evaluation table. Yes, you can see for every article, NVivo was able to do something we call like generate information. If you click on like attention area in the examination collection, NVivo will highlight that information. This is the information that is there. If we click another area, NVivo will also highlight the information for that area. That means you can go and read this information and make a summary in your literature evaluation table. So for every article, you can fill all the areas that you want: attention, directions for future research, learning, methodology. You can make short summaries and be able to create what we call summary links with that. Now, there is this small button here that automatically creates summaries for all the content that you've coded. And the automatic summaries will be inserted in our framework matrix. In this case, our framework matrix is our literature evaluation table. So let's click on that button and see what happens. NVivo is taking its time. So NVivo will give us a notice there, and it's showing us a lot of summaries were inserted. There are those that NVivo was not able to insert, and it did something we call truncation, just filled it with some information because they were very long. So NVivo was not able to summarize. Now we can press Ctrl Shift and E and export these as a literature evaluation table that we can go and edit, and we export, and let's open, and this is the literature evaluation table we've been able to generate generate from NVivo. Remember, NVivo does summaries for the different themes that we identified that were prevalent in our scholarly articles. You can see like we have learning, we have purpose, and in learning we have all the different articles that talk about learning. In purpose we have all the different articles that talk about purpose. In sample sizes we have all the different articles that talk about sample sizes. In social you have all the different articles that talk about social and students and so on and so forth. So that's how you can use NVivo to conduct a literature review and to save at least half the time when conducting a literature review. Thank you. Remember, if you need coaching or done for you services with NVivo 14, message me right now. Link and email address in the description. Thank you.